silence is not the absence of noise, it is the presence of power. It is not the withdrawal of voice, it is the expansion of will. The man who understands this becomes more than a man, he becomes a force. For he no longer wastes his breath trying to prove what can only be revealed through command. He no longer fills the air with weak declarations or nervous chatter. He learns the ancient law, that the quiet mind governs the noisy world. Look around you. The loudest voices are rarely the wisest. The most reactive people are rarely the richest. The ones who must constantly be seen, heard, validated, they are not the ones building thrones. They are the ones distracting themselves from the emptiness within. But the wealthy man, the disciplined man, the man of silent resolve and inward fire, he walks differently. He thinks before he moves. He listens before he speaks. And when he speaks, the room quiets. Not because he demands it, but because his very presence carries the weight of 1,000 unspoken convictions. This is the power of cultivated silence. It is not passive. It is not weakness. It is not retreat. It is mastery. And in a world addicted to noise, silence becomes an asset, a secret weapon, a declaration of control. Those who do not speak much are not without thoughts. They are simply unwilling to waste them. They understand that power is diluted when it is spread too thin. The master preserves his energy, and when he releases it, he moves the world. So let me speak now to the few who are ready. You who are tired of the chaos of reactive living. You who are sick of giving your energy to distraction, to drama, to false urgencies. You who are ready to take back what has always been yours, your attention, your will, your inner clarity, your ability to shape your world with thought, with calm, with unwavering conviction. If that is you, then listen. And not just with your ears. Listen with your judgment, with your honesty, with that quiet part of yourself that is tired of pretending, tired of performing, tired of being pulled in 1,000 directions when you were born to move like a laser. Because I will tell you now, the more silent you are, the more successful and wealthy you become. Why? Not because silence is magical, but because silence is mental clarity in action. Because silence is discipline over impulse. Because silence is alignment over approval. Because silence is strength without noise. And in a world drowning in performance, silence is proof of power. The first reason the silent become wealthy is this: silence allows for accurate thinking. Most people do not think. They react, they feel, they assume, they rush to speak, to post, to prove, and in their noise they lose precision. But success requires precision. You must see clearly. You must think slowly. You must examine the roots of your thoughts before you act on them. You must ask, is this true? Is this necessary? Is this aligned with my vision? You cannot do this while surrounded by noise. You cannot do this while reacting to every opinion, every trend, every argument. You must withdraw. You must create space. You must train your mind to become still, not empty, but still so that it can observe without distortion. Because when the mind is clear, decisions become simple. When the mind is silent, the next step reveals itself. But when the mind is loud, filled with emotion, distraction, insecurity, everything becomes fog. And no empire is ever built in fog. So you choose noise or clarity, approval or precision, performance or power. And that choice is made daily in the quiet hours when no one is watching. The second reason the silent become wealthy is because silence trains emotional detachment. You cannot command your life if you are a slave to your emotions. You cannot build an empire while constantly reacting to insults, setbacks, and praise alike. Success is not reactive, it is proactive. It is built on direction, not distraction. But emotional reactivity is the great enemy of discipline. It pulls your focus outward. It makes you easy to manipulate. It makes you desperate to explain, to justify, to defend. Silence frees you. When you feel the need to react, pause. When you feel the sting of insult, breathe. When you feel the urge to prove yourself, resist. Why? Because in that pause, in that silence, you reclaim power. You become the one who chooses how to feel, how to act, how to move. This is what separates the weak from the strong, the ability to remain unmoved. And the more you practice this silence, this pause, this deliberate restraint, the more unshakable you become. You will begin to see things clearly, not through the lens of emotion, but through the lens of purpose. And when purpose becomes your lens, you will no longer take things personally. You will no longer waste energy fighting battles that do not build your future. You will no longer be triggered by the noise because you have become a master of stillness. The third reason the silent become wealthy is that silence sharpens focus. And focus is the currency of success. Where your attention goes, your results grow. The loud are scattered. The loud are pulled in every direction, seeking validation, chasing dopamine, addicted to reaction. But the silent man, the focused man, he guards his attention like gold. He says no to 99 things. He chooses one aim, and he pursues it with monastic obsession. He is not seduced by every trend, every invitation, every opportunity that glitters. He knows what he is building. And so he remains silent, not because he has nothing to say, but because he has too much to protect. You must protect your focus. Do not explain yourself to people who do not share your vision. Do not share plans with those who do not walk your path. Do not expose your inner world to those who do not deserve access. Your vision is not a democracy. It is a divine appointment. And it must be protected with silence. Because once the world knows your direction, it will try to pull you from it. But if you remain focused, if you remain silent, if you remain locked into your own purpose, then no force on earth can stop you. The fourth reason the silent become wealthy is because silence reveals presence, and presence is power. In every room, in every negotiation, in every confrontation, the man who is most present controls the frame. But presence requires detachment from noise. You cannot be fully here if part of you is performing, impressing, reacting. You must learn to arrive fully, calmly, confidently. You must train yourself to sit in silence without anxiety, to wait without rushing, to listen without interrupting, to observe without judging. And when you do, people feel it. They feel your depth. They feel your restraint. They feel your authority not because of what you say, but because of what you withhold. The silent man is unpredictable. He is unreadable. He is mysterious. And in that mystery, he becomes powerful. Because people fear what they cannot predict. They respect what they cannot shake. And they follow what remains grounded when the world trembles. You want to lead? Then become still. You want to command respect? Then stop performing. You want to build wealth? Then protect your energy like royalty protects a throne room with silence, with precision, with unbending poise. And now, the fifth and final reason the silent become wealthy. Silence cultivates inner vision. The world will try to distract you. It will show you what to want. It will shout what to fear. It will sell you dreams wrapped in noise. But true wealth is not found outside. It is found within in the clarity of your own aim. And that aim can only be discovered in silence, in the still hours of the morning, in the moments of solitude that others flee, in the breath between thought and reaction. You must go within. You must hear your own voice, not the voice of society, not the voice of doubt, not the voice of the crowd. Your voice, the one that says, "This is who I am, this is what I want, this is what I will build." And once you hear it, once you trust it, you will never again chase the world, because you will have become the one it chases. You must now understand this eternal law. The man who rules himself has no master, and he rules himself not with noise, but with stillness, not with pride, but with precision, not with passion alone, but with presence and principle. There is no throne outside you. The throne is your capacity to control your inner state regardless of external events. And every moment you remain silent when others react, every time you delay response to first ask yourself, what serves my aim? Every time you walk away from the seduction of being right and instead choose to remain aligned, you rise higher. You do not need to fight to be powerful. You need to refuse to be pulled. Because silence is not absence. Silence is rejection of the irrelevant. You become rich in clarity, in respect, in wealth, when your energy no longer leaks out through explanation, overreaction, or emotional undisciplined speech. Let me make it plain. The tongue is a double-edged sword. With it, you either build or destroy. And most destroy not others, but themselves. They speak too soon, too often, too emotionally. They betray their own intentions with unnecessary speech. They tell the wrong people too much, too fast, and then wonder why they are misused. You must speak less, mean more. You must reserve your words like a king reserves his soldiers. You must know when silence is the loudest statement you can make, because when your words are rare, they carry weight. When your energy is disciplined, it becomes attractive. When your thoughts are guarded, your plans are protected. And when your presence is still, the world begins to orbit around you. This is not theory, this is law. It is not charisma that draws people to you. It is control. Because we live in a world of reactive, distracted, overextended minds. And when someone appears who is still, focused, grounded, they are seen not as odd, but as divine. Be that person. Be the exception to noise. Be the architect of your inner world. Be the one who enters a room and does not explain, does not plead, does not entertain, but simply is. And that being, that essence, that presence is built in silence, in daily silence, in disciplined stillness, and I will tell you something few will admit. Most people are afraid of silence, because in silence they are forced to meet themselves. They are forced to sit with thoughts they've avoided, feelings they've suppressed, truths they've denied. But you must seek it, because in silence you see clearly. You see what you truly believe. You see what patterns run your life. You see who you've become and who you're meant to become. And from that vision you begin to choose. Not react, choose. And this is the core of wealth, choice. The power to decide your direction, your reaction, your focus. And silence is the space in which that power is found. So I say this to you now, if you truly want to become wealthy, do not first seek more money, seek more silence, because in that silence you will discover what habits to break, what people to release, what purpose to pursue, what weakness to confront, and what discipline to install. Wealth begins not with a transaction, but with a transformation of thought. And that transformation demands solitude. This is why so few ever find it, because they crave company more than clarity. They crave entertainment more than evolution. They crave comfort more than consequence. But you must be different. You must be willing to be alone with your mind, to sit, to write, to think, to ask hard questions, to dismantle lies, to destroy illusions, to strip away every identity that was assigned to you until only truth remains. And then from that place of complete inner clarity, you begin to build, you begin to walk, you begin to speak not often but effectively. Because now your words come not from insecurity, but from vision, not from desperation, but from direction, not from a need to be seen, but from a commitment to move the world without shouting. And the world feels it. They won't always understand you, but they will feel you. And that is the secret of silent influence. It is the most powerful force on earth, to influence without trying, to lead without noise, to attract without chasing, to build without bragging. This is not reserved for the chosen. It is reserved for the trained. So train. Train in silence. Train your thoughts to serve, not sabotage. Train your emotions to obey, not overtake. Train your body to move only when the mission demands. Train your words to be rare and sacred, not cheap and scattered. Because the scattered do not build thrones. They build cages. And the more they talk, the tighter the bars. But the disciplined, the silent, they build fortresses, invisible to most, but undeniable to all. Now I ask you, as you sit there, reading these words, breathing in the vibration of this message, what have you been speaking that should have been silence? What have you been explaining that should have been eliminated? What have you been chasing that should have been replaced by stillness? And most of all, what truth have you been avoiding in the noise? Because that truth, the one you resist, is your key, and it will only reveal itself when you are ready. And readiness is not an emotion. It is a decision Decide now that from this moment forward, you will begin to walk the path of the silent sovereign. You will speak less. You will observe more. You will build in darkness. You will reveal through execution. You will let the results speak the words your mouth no longer needs to form. And you will become not louder, but heavier. Heavy with purpose. Heavy with clarity. Heavy with power. Because true wealth does not make noise. It makes movement. And the man who moves without noise changes everything. You must now ask yourself the most sacred question a man can ever ask. Can I be trusted with power? Not power over others, but power over yourself. Because if you cannot control your thoughts, if you cannot master your impulses, if you cannot walk into chaos and remain calm, you are not powerful, you are a liability. And the world will treat you as such. Not because it is cruel, but because it is accurate. But if you can control yourself, if you can detach from the pull of the moment, if you can restrain your tongue, sharpen your thoughts, and move with disciplined precision, then the world begins to yield, because it recognizes a force that cannot be bought, baited, or broken, and that force is silence. There is a level of silence that comes not from fear, not from weakness, not from insecurity, but from dominion. It is the silence of a man who has nothing to prove and everything to build. It is the silence of a man who no longer negotiates with his emotions. It is the silence of a man who wakes before the sun not for motivation, but for mission. It is the silence of a man who turns down the noise, the meetings, the distractions, the opinions, not because he is arrogant, but because he is exact. Because his energy is not random, his time is not for rent, his mind is not public property. He belongs to his vision. And so must you. You must understand that in silence your mind becomes a weapon. When there are no more distractions, you see the pattern. When there is no one to impress, you find the truth. When the crowd is removed, your character is revealed. And you will not always like what you see at first, but that is the point. Silence exposes the weak, so that the strong can be built. And the building, the real building, begins when your identity is no longer shaped by noise. Because noise asks, what do they think? But silence demands, what do I know? And what you know, what you truly know, that is what leads to riches. Because wealth follows certainty, and certainty is forged in solitude. You do not find yourself in crowds. You lose yourself there. You do not become rich in meetings. You become rich in decisions, decisions made in the dark, long before the world understands. And once you understand this, you will no longer panic when you're alone. You will crave it. You will no longer chase validation. You will reject it. You will no longer explain your goals. You will protect them. You will become quiet, not passive, but concentrated. And from that concentration, the world will feel a different kind of presence, one that cannot be faked, one that cannot be copied, one that speaks without speaking, the kind of presence that builds empires, attracts allies, silences enemies, and turns time itself into a servant. That is the gift of the silent mind. Not just peace, but power. Not just clarity, but command. And you will command not by raising your voice, but by raising your standard. Not by arguing with fools, but by becoming impossible to provoke. Not by posting more, but by producing more. Not by trying to look successful, but by being so disciplined, so still, so calculated that success has no choice but to manifest as a side effect of your stillness. Let the others burn out trying to be heard. Let them waste their genius trying to be understood. You will do what only the few have the strength to do. You will remain silent. You will remain unseen. You will remain unbothered until it is time. And when that time comes, you will not need to convince. You will not need to perform. You will not need to explain, because your results will roar what your mouth no longer needs to say. This is the wealth of silence. It begins with one decision: to stop proving, to start building, to shut out the world and meet the man within. He is waiting. He is dangerous. He is ready. Let him rise. Let him lead. And let the world feel the thunder of your silence. Do not mistake stillness for stagnation. The still mind is not asleep, it is calculating. Like a hawk in the sky, it sees everything before it strikes. It does not waste motion. It does not panic in hunger. It waits. And when the time comes, it moves with such precision that the world can do nothing but surrender. That is the mind you must train. You must learn to wait without weakness. You must learn to prepare without applause. You must be content to be underrated, uninvited, unmentioned, because none of those things affect a man whose inner world is already enthroned. Most people cannot handle invisibility. They are addicted to being seen. They fear being forgotten. But I tell you, the most powerful man in the room is the one whose silence makes others uneasy, the one whose energy shifts the atmosphere without ever raising his voice, the one who speaks only when speaking builds something. That man owns the room, even if he says nothing. You do not need to be seen when you are becoming. Because when you become, they will not just see, they will feel it. But the becoming happens in silence. It happens when you turn off the noise, when you sever the addiction to reaction, when you stop talking long enough to listen to your own soul. And it will not speak with fireworks. It will whisper. It will ask you, are your habits worthy of your dream? Is your focus guarded like your fortune? Do your words align with your aim, or do they betray it? Do you live like someone who has been entrusted with a mission, or like someone just trying to survive another week? Most men never answer these questions because they are too loud to hear them. But the rare man, the disciplined man, he does not flinch from these questions. He builds his life around them. He carves his schedule to make room for them. He filters his circle with them. He turns down noise, not because he hates people, but because he loves alignment. And from that alignment, a new frequency begins to rise, one that others will never understand. They will say, you're distant. They will say, you're different. Let them, because they do not see what you see. They do not hear what you hear. They do not walk with the weight you walk with. And they were not given the same fire, so of course they will not understand the silence you now honor. This is what must happen. You must move from expression to execution. Most people speak of goals. They write them, they post them, they preach them, but they rarely become them. Why? Because they are addicted to the feeling of commitment, but allergic to the silence that true commitment requires. They want growth to feel good. They want discipline to be glamorous. They want transformation without the solitude that always comes first. But there is no path to wealth, to mastery, to transformation that does not pass through voluntary isolation. Not loneliness, isolation. Isolation is when the man says, I will be alone with this mission until the mission becomes my mind. Isolation is when the man says, I would rather be misunderstood with purpose than celebrated in mediocrity. Isolation is when the man says, I do not care how many followers I lose. I care how much power I gain. And from that space, the real metamorphosis begins. You begin to speak less, not because you lack something to say, but because your standards now reject what does not build. You begin to care less about being heard and more about being undeniable. You begin to realize that success has nothing to do with volume and everything to do with vibration. That is why the rich don't shout. That is why the wise don't explain. That is why the disciplined don't justify. They move and the world adjusts. You want wealth? Then understand this. The mind that is silent enough to plan long-term without distraction, the heart that is detached enough to remain calm in the face of rejection, the body that is disciplined enough to rise before the weak have finished dreaming, the tongue that is restrained enough to speak only when needed. Those four things, mind, heart, body, speech, when mastered, become a weapon too great to be defeated. And that weapon is you, but only if you have the silence to sharpen it. Because no man can become sharp in chaos. The sword is not forged in applause. It is forged in fire and cooled in stillness. You want a sharp mind? Sharpen it in silence. You want a steady heart? Stabilize it in solitude. You want total control of your life? Begin with control of your tongue. If you can control when to speak, what to say, and when to say nothing, you have already won battles most men never even enter. Because most men lose themselves in words before they ever face a real war. But you must be different. You must be deliberate. You must be surgical. with your speech. And if you ever wonder whether to speak, ask yourself, will this build my empire or drain my energy? If it does not build, it must be cut. Because your energy is the currency of your future. And silence, true, disciplined, deliberate silence, is how you protect that currency. So from now on, let your silence become your defense. Let it become your strategy. Let it become your meditation. Let it become your authority. Let it become your signature, the way you walk into every room with eyes that say more than your lips ever could. And when people ask, why are you so quiet these days? Smile, because you now know the truth. The quieter you become, the sharper your mind grows, the deeper your focus cuts, the clearer your vision becomes, and the louder your results thunder. This is the way, and it is yours now if you choose it. Choose it in thought, choose it in habit, choose it in breath, and above all, choose it in silence. There is a difference between a man who speaks because he needs to be heard and a man who speaks because silence has completed its work. You can feel it. One is desperate, the other is deliberate. One is fragile, easily offended, easily flattered, easily led. The other is formed not by the world, but by the furnace of inner restraint. Because when you've spent enough time in silence, you begin to hear something most people never do, your own frequency. And when you find that frequency, that deep ancient rhythm of thought, intention, vision, and breath, you no longer fear being misunderstood, left out, or overlooked. Why? Because now you are occupied with command. You're too busy building the inner kingdom to worry about commentary from the outer crowd. You walk differently. Because now you know. You know that every time you react, you surrender your throne. You know that every time you explain, you lower your power. You know that every time you speak before you've thought, you fracture your authority. So you stop. Not to be mysterious, not to be antisocial. You stop because you have become precise. And this precision becomes your wealth. Because wealth is not a number. It is a relationship between your vision and your execution. And silence is the bridge between them. Only in silence can you examine, am I living in alignment or in reaction? Only in silence can you detect the subtle lies your ego whispers to keep you small. Only in silence can you destroy the parts of you that crave approval, permission, applause. And only in silence can you install the version of yourself that no longer needs to perform because he is. He is still. He is aware. He is direct. He is grounded. And this man, this silent, focused, unshakable man, becomes more attractive than 1,000 flashy imposters. Why? Because he doesn't need anything. And neediness repels wealth, while composure magnetizes it. Because the wealthy do not chase. They build. They train. They watch. They decide. And when the time is right, they move with such silent precision that the world doesn't even realize what happened until it's already been changed. That is what silence does. It doesn't announce your rise. It becomes your rise. And you must understand, this silence is not a tactic. It is a way of life. It is how you make every decision. It is how you end every argument before it begins. It is how you maintain posture in the face of chaos. It is how you keep your power when others lose theirs, trying to prove. Because once you realize how expensive it is to explain yourself to the wrong people, once you realize how much energy you waste speaking into ears that don't understand the language of purpose, once you realize how many delays you create by reacting to what doesn't deserve your reaction, you begin to understand that silence is not just peace. It is profit. Every time you remain silent, you gain equity in yourself. Every time you observe instead of react, you multiply internal capital. Every time you delay speech to increase understanding, you are compounding your power like interest on a long-term investment that others were too impatient to hold. So hold it. Hold your tongue. Hold your frame. Hold your mission, even when no one else believes. Because when you are silent long enough, the belief moves from your mouth to your bones. And when belief is in your bones, you no longer need to say a word. You walk in a room, and the room listens. You set a boundary, and it holds. You show up, and things change not because you're flashy, but because your very presence says, I have nothing to prove. I have only things to build. That presence cannot be bought. It cannot be faked. It cannot be taught by loud men chasing attention. It is earned in the dark. It is formed in isolation. It is refined in rejection. And it is revealed in silence. So walk that path. Let others fight for attention. Let others shout for respect. You become so still that the world has no choice but to notice what no noise could ever disguise. You are here. You are ready. And you are no longer giving your energy to what is beneath your mission. That is the wealth no one sees, and it is yours. If you are silent enough to receive it, understand this now and never forget it. Most men are poor, not because they lack opportunity, but because they leak energy. They leak it through gossip. They leak it through emotion. They leak it through over-talking, over-explaining, over-promising. They exhaust themselves convincing people who were never going to understand and never needed to. And so they grow tired, and then they grow bitter. And eventually, they grow invisible, not because the world rejected them, but because they abandoned their own silence. But you will not be that man, because you will recognize that energy is wealth, and silence is the vault that protects it. When you keep your words to yourself, you keep your power. When you delay your reaction, you reclaim your time. When you walk away from pettiness, from arguments, from attempts to bait you, you do not lose, you gain, because now your energy is yours again. You become a reservoir, still, deep, full of strength that others do not understand. And they won't understand. They will call it arrogance. They will say you've changed. They will try to pull you back into the old ways, where everyone performed for each other, said too much, and built nothing. But you will not return, because you have tasted what silence gives you: clarity, command, courage, and eventually certainty. The man who is certain does not speak much. Why would he? He has no one to convince. He knows where he is going, and he is going there alone if necessary. That certainty becomes your compass. It becomes your confidence. It becomes the unshakable calm you carry into rooms full of noise. People will ask, "Why don't you say more?" And you will answer with your results. They will say, "Why don't you respond?" And you will answer with your discipline. They will say, "Why don't you react?" And you will answer with your freedom, because that is what silence gives you: freedom from the addiction to being understood. You do not owe your process to anyone. You do not owe your pain an audience. You do not owe your future an announcement. You owe it yourself, and your silence is your proof that you take it seriously. Every day you rise without explaining your goal, you become stronger. Every time you work while others talk, you become rarer. Every time you delay speaking to refine your thoughts, you become sharper. And every time you choose to say nothing when provoked, you rise above the ones still ruled by their reactions. That is power. Not performative, not noisy, not loud, but internal, concentrated, composed. The kind of power that does not ask for respect but commands it. And it is built, brick by brick, breath by breath, in silence, not in public, not in the feed, not in the crowd, but in the early morning, in the unshared journal, in the unspoken decision to do what must be done without fanfare. The world will never understand this path, because the world thrives on exposure. But you are becoming private and powerful. Where others advertise intentions, you protect yours. Where others chase virality, you chase victory, silent, focused, inevitable. And one day, they will ask how you did it. They will want to know your routine, your mindset, your methods. But they will not realize that what changed everything was your silence. There comes a moment in a man's life when he must choose what kind of power he will pursue. The kind that pleases the crowd, or the kind that builds a kingdom. The first is loud, fast, fragile, here today, gone tomorrow. But the second is invisible at first. It grows in the dark. It deepens in silence. It walks with no need for recognition. And then one day, it reveals itself fully formed, unstoppable, undeniable. This is the path of those who understand the value of saying nothing until it is time to say everything through what they've built. You must now understand the psychology of the silent master. He speaks only when the timing is right because he knows that words spoken too soon are weapons dropped in the hands of enemies. He does not argue because arguments are traps. They do not resolve truth, they reward emotion. He does not correct the opinions of the ignorant because they are not seeking truth, they are seeking reaction. And he does not explain his transformation because transformation is not a marketing campaign. It is sacred. It is sovereign. It is silent. You must adopt this way of thinking or be devoured by the chaos of those who never learn to still themselves. Because silence is not just about what you withhold. It's about what you fortify. When you stop speaking, your mind grows stronger. When you stop defending, your energy grows sharper. When you stop justifying, your dignity becomes immovable. That is why I say this without apology. If you wish to become rich, truly, unshakably rich, you must stop thinking like a servant of impulse and start thinking like a sovereign of discipline. And that begins with controlling the flow of your words. Because where your words go, your life follows. Speak in reaction, and you'll live in regret. Speak in anger, and you'll live in apology. Speak in weakness, and you'll live in validation addiction. But if you wait, if you allow the emotion to pass, if you breathe and sit in the fire of that silence, you will discover something rare. Your words become sharper than any sword because they are no longer tied to ego. They are now tied to vision, to legacy, to alignment. And from this place, you will speak less but mean more. You will move slower but arrive faster. You will become a man of intensity without anxiety. And that intensity will be felt in every room you enter. Because stillness is not emptiness. It is readiness. And readiness is what makes kings out of quiet men. Now you may wonder, in this noisy world, how can silence still win? How can restraint still rise? How can someone become wealthy by speaking less? Let me answer clearly. Because the world is starving for clarity, and clarity does not shout. Clarity moves. It decides. It builds. It does not participate in every debate. It does not explain every choice. It does not need to be agreed with, because truth does not beg to be believed. And when you live like this, when your entire way of being begins to orbit around clarity, alignment, and control, you separate yourself from 99% of men. You rise, silently, while they drown in their need to be seen. You grow, quietly, while they perform for an audience that doesn't even care. You accumulate wealth, not because you tricked the system, but because you became the system. You now operate by principle, not pressure. You live by design, not distraction. And when people finally notice, when they finally realize you've changed, they'll wonder where you went. They'll wonder how you disappeared, and how, without a sound, you became a force. Let them wonder. Let them speculate. Because they will never understand that your greatest transformation happened in the one place they never had the courage to enter. The silence. You must now understand, the wealthiest man is not the one with the most followers, but the one with the most internal agreement. Agreement between his thoughts and his actions. Agreement between his principles and his performance. Agreement between his silence and his results. Because most men live in contradiction. They speak with certainty, but act with fear. They project strength, but are inwardly chaotic. They perform calmness, but are slaves to approval. You must not be like them. You must not be loud in public and weak in private. You must not seek respect with your words while your habits betray your dignity. You must not claim to be a leader while being owned by reaction. Number. You must build inner unity. You must become the kind of man whose thoughts, habits, words, and presence all tell the same story. A story of discipline, a story of alignment. A story of a man who did not wait to be seen, but made himself undeniable through unbreakable daily command. And that story begins not with action, but with awareness. Awareness that most of your suffering comes not from what happened, but from how you spoke to yourself about it. Awareness that every wasted hour, every broken promise, every toxic relationship you entertained was made possible not by failure, but by neglect. And the only way to reverse that neglect is to stop speaking long enough to listen to the deeper law within you. Silence is that reset. It is the clearing of fog. It is the rejection of noise. It is the spiritual exhale that says, I no longer need to be everything to everyone. I will now become something unshakable to myself. And that inner allegiance is where real wealth begins. You must learn to sit in that silence without reaching for escape. You must learn to stare into boredom and realize that boredom is not a signal to run, it is a signal to go deeper, to ask better questions, to audit your life, to refine your thinking, to write down what you've avoided, to confront the parts of yourself that were too loud to be heard while you were busy talking. And yes, it will be uncomfortable. At first, it will feel like loss, like withdrawal, because you are cutting off your supply of external stimulation, the same addiction that most men die from without ever naming. But after the discomfort, something begins to happen. Something subtle, something sacred. Your thoughts slow down. Your emotions begin to soften. Your desire becomes clearer. You begin to crave truth instead of attention. You begin to seek accuracy instead of opinion. You begin to see yourself, not your mask, not your role, not your public persona, yourself. And once you've seen that man, that quiet, capable, relentless version of you who never needed applause, never needed explanation, never needed to justify his hunger, once you meet him, you will never go back, because he is not a dream. He is you, stripped of noise. He is who you were before the world distracted you. He is who you become when you finally stop seeking and start building. But hear me, you cannot build from noise. You can only build from depth, and depth requires quiet. That's why the deeper your mission becomes, the quieter your voice must grow. Not because you are scared to speak, but because your voice now has a price. Because you now understand. Words have weight. Time has cost. Attention has consequence. And every time you give any of those away carelessly, you pay with your future. But the silent man, he pays up front with solitude, with discipline, with restraint, and he collects later in wealth, in clarity, in freedom. So the next time you feel the need to explain yourself, to post your progress, to defend your standards, to overshare your pain, ask yourself, what am I trying to buy with these words? If the answer is validation, stop. If the answer is approval, stop. If the answer is visibility, stop. Because nothing you buy with those currencies will last. But if the answer is, I speak now because this builds, then speak. And when you do, let your words strike like a hammer. Because when you've spent enough time in silence, every word becomes a weapon. Every gesture becomes intentional. Every move becomes sacred. And the world will feel the weight of a man who has become his own law. You are no longer here to argue with those who misunderstand you. You are not here to convert the doubters. You are not here to prove yourself to those who live below their own standard. You are here to build, to become, and to command not with noise, but with your presence, your principle, your unwavering discipline. That is why, when you finally reach the place where your mind is no longer at war with itself, when your heart no longer flinches at silence, when your voice no longer chases recognition, you will feel something rare, not a surge, not a rush, but a deep, immovable weight settle inside you. A stillness, a gravity. And that gravity will become your wealth, because now you understand. Power is not movement. Power is restraint. It is the man who can hold his frame while the world panics. It is the man who can hear lies and feel no need to respond. It is the man who can feel insult, temptation, provocation, and remain sovereign. He who controls himself controls the game. He who controls the game shapes reality. And he who shapes reality no longer speaks of wealth. He becomes it, but only because he first mastered what no one else would dare face, his own inner world. That is why silence matters. It is the original ground. It is the clean slate. It is the empty space into which only truth can enter. And once you've built your life on that kind of truth, no man can take it from you. You could lose your money. You could lose your name. You could lose your comfort. But if you still possess silence, you still possess strategy. And if you still possess strategy, you can rebuild everything from the inside out. That's why the silent man cannot be broken. Because what he builds is never built on noise. It is built on discipline, on decisions made when no one was watching, on habits executed when no one was cheering, on vision declared only to himself and proven only by action. So now you know. The most successful man is not the loudest in the room, he is the most precise. The most wealthy man is not the one who flaunts, he is the one who no longer needs to speak of money at all. The most respected man is not the one who demands attention, but the one who attracts it by existing in full alignment with his own standard. And the man who lives this way has no fear of loss, because he knows everything external can fall, but the man of silence will always rise again, because silence is not weakness. It is the source, and the source does not shout. It does not chase. It does not beg. It creates. And now, so will you. Let the others talk. Let them rush. Let them need to be seen. You move differently. You move quietly. You move purposefully. You move inward. You move upward. And when the world wonders how you did it, do not answer. Let them feel the answer. Let them feel your silence.